My daughter told me I was too old for social media and should stop embarrassing the family with my posts. She said people my age didn't belong online and that I was making a fool of myself. I didn't argue, I just smiled and nodded. 3 weeks later, when the sheriff handed me their eviction notice to serve them, I took a photo of it and posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Some people learn the hard way that respect goes both ways." The post got over 2,000 likes in 4 hours. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eleanor Walsh, and at 74 years old, I never thought I'd become what young people call internet famous. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. I've lived in Rockland, Maine, my entire life, watching this coastal town change from a quiet fishing village to a bustling tourist destination. The smell of salt air and lobster boats has been my constant companion through 7 decades of winters that could freeze your bones and summers that made every harsh month worthwhile. I raised 3 children in the white clapboard house my husband built with his own hands back in 1968. Tom passed 5 years ago, leaving me with a mortgage-free home, a comfortable pension from his 30 years at the shipyard, and enough savings to live comfortably without being a burden to anyone. Our house sits on Maple Street, 3 blocks from the harbor, with a wraparound porch that faces the water and catches the morning sun just perfectly for my coffee. After Tom died, I discovered Facebook quite by accident. My neighbor, Betty Morrison, showed me how her daughter had posted pictures of her new baby, and suddenly I could see my great-grandson in California taking his first steps. It seemed like magic. Within a month, I had learned to post my own photos of my garden, my famous blueberry pies, and the magnificent sunsets that painted Penobscot Bay every evening. I shared stories about Rockland's history, posted pictures of the old fishing boats, and connected with other longtime residents who remembered when Main Street had 3 hardware stores and no coffee shops that charged $5 for a cup. My posts were simple and genuine. I'd photograph the cardinal that visited my bird feeder every morning at 7:15 sharp, or share the recipe for my mother's fish chowder that had been in our family since the 1920s. Sometimes I'd post a memory about the old days, like when the Rockland breakwater was built, or how we used to ice skate on Chickawaukee Lake when the winters were colder and longer. People seemed to enjoy these glimpses into a Maine that was disappearing, and I found myself with nearly 800 friends, most of them locals, who appreciated stories about our shared history. The comments were always kind. "Thanks for sharing, Eleanor," or "Your garden looks beautiful this year," or "I remember when my grandmother made chowder just like that." These simple interactions became a bright spot in my days. After spending 40 years as a Canary School librarian, I miss the daily connections with people, the sense of being useful and appreciated. Social media gave me a way to stay involved in my community, to share knowledge, and to feel like my voice still mattered. My daughter Rachel had different ideas about what was appropriate for someone my age. She's 46, works as a real estate agent in Portland, and has very strong opinions about everything from politics to parenting to proper social media etiquette. She married David 15 years ago, a man who sells insurance and speaks in the careful, measured tones of someone who's afraid of saying the wrong thing. They have 2 children, Emma, who's 14, and Jack, who's 11, and they've been struggling financially for the past 3 years. The trouble started last Christmas when Rachel came to visit with her family. I was showing Emma some of the comments on my latest post about making snow ice cream the old-fashioned way, when Rachel looked over my shoulder and frowned. "Mom, you really shouldn't be posting so much personal information online," she said, scrolling through my recent photos. "And some of these pictures, well, they're not very flattering. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now, back to the story. You need to think about your image. I was confused. What image was I supposed to maintain? I was a widow who grew tomatoes and made quilts, not a celebrity worried about paparazzi. But Rachel continued her critique. "And this post about Dad's old boat," she said, pointing to a photo I'd shared of Tom's restored dory. "You're giving away too much information about our family's business. People don't need to know everything about your life." I tried to explain that sharing memories and connecting with neighbors was exactly why I enjoyed Facebook, but Rachel cut me off. Mom, people your age just don't understand how the internet works. You're making yourself vulnerable to scams and identity theft. Plus, honestly, some of your posts are a little embarrassing. The one where you're wearing Dad's old fishing hat and holding that giant lobster? Emma's friends saw that and asked if you were homeless. The comments stung more than I cared to admit. I had been so proud of that lobster, a 4-pounder that my neighbor's grandson had given me, and Tom's old yellow rain hat was my favorite piece of his clothing. I wore it when I worked in the garden because it reminded me of him, and I thought the photo captured a moment of pure joy. To learn that my granddaughter's friends saw it as evidence of poverty or mental decline was a shock I wasn't prepared for. David nodded, along with everything Rachel said, adding his own concerns about, quote, digital footprints and online safety for seniors. Emma looked mortified by the entire conversation, and Jack kept playing his video game, completely oblivious to the tension building in my living room. I felt like I was being lectured by well-meaning but condescending adults who had decided I was no longer capable of making my own decisions. Over the next few months, Rachel's criticism intensified. She would call me after seeing certain posts, suggesting I delete photos that she deemed unflattering, or asking me to remove comments that mentioned family members. When I posted a picture of the quilt I was making for Emma's birthday, Rachel called within an hour to tell me I shouldn't announce gift details online because it ruined the surprise and made the family look showy. The final straw came in March, during what should have been a pleasant Sunday phone call. I had posted a photo of my crocus blooming in the snow, the first sign of spring in Maine, along with a caption about how hope always finds a way to push through the hardest ground. It was a simple, optimistic post that had received dozens of likes and encouraging comments from friends, who were also eager for winter to end. Rachel's tone was sharper than usual when she called. Mom, we need to talk about your Facebook habit. David and I have been discussing it, and we think you're spending too much time online. It's not healthy for someone your age to be so focused on getting attention from strangers. You're posting multiple times a day, and frankly, it's becoming obsessive. People are starting to talk. I asked her what people were saying and who exactly was talking about my flower photos and chowder recipes. Rachel became defensive. It's not about the specific posts, Mom. It's about the bigger picture. You're too old to be trying to be some kind of internet personality. It's undignified. Social media is for young people who understand how to use it properly. You're just making yourself look foolish. And by extension, you're reflecting poorly on our family. The word foolish hit me like a slap. I had raised this woman, supported her through college, helped her with the down payment on her first house, and babysat her children countless weekends so she could build her real estate career. I had never asked for anything in return except basic respect and the occasional phone call. Now she was telling me that sharing photos of my garden and memories of my late husband made me look foolish. I kept my voice steady when I responded. Rachel, I'm not trying to be an internet personality. I'm just staying connected with my community and sharing parts of my life that bring me joy. These aren't strangers. They're neighbors and old friends and people who knew your father. When Mrs. Patterson comments on my posts about the harbor, she's not a stranger. She's the woman who taught you piano for 6 years. But Rachel wouldn't hear it. Mom, you don't understand how the internet works. You're 74 years old. You need to act your age and find more appropriate hobbies. Maybe you could take up crossword puzzles or join a book club instead of posting pictures of yourself online every day. It's just not something women your age should be doing. The conversation ended with Rachel promising to help me transition away from social media and suggesting I focus on real-world activities that are more suitable for seniors. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the phone in my hand and a crushing realization that my own daughter saw me as an embarrassment. That night, I sat on my porch watching the harbor lights reflect on the water and wondered when I had become such a burden to the people I loved most. I thought about all the comments from my Facebook friends, the connections I had made, the memories I had shared, and the simple pleasure I took in documenting the beauty of everyday life in coastal Maine. None of it felt foolish or inappropriate to me. It felt like living. I also thought about something Rachel didn't know, something that had been weighing on my mind for several weeks. As a landlord who owned the duplex where Rachel and David lived, I had been patient about their increasingly late rent payments. What started as occasional delays had become a pattern, and they were now 3 months behind, owing me over $4,000. I had been reluctant to take any formal action because they were family, and I knew they were struggling with David's reduced commissions and Rachel's inconsistent real estate sales. But patience and family loyalty apparently didn't extend both ways. While I was being understanding about their financial difficulties, they felt perfectly comfortable telling me I was too old, too foolish, and too embarrassing to participate in the modern world. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who considered me too senile for social media was also too irresponsible to pay her rent on time. I had spent my entire adult life putting my children's needs before my own, supporting them emotionally and financially whenever they needed help. I had never made them feel ashamed or embarrassed about their struggles. I had never told them they were too young, too naive, or too anything to make their own choices. But apparently, reaching the age of 74 had stripped me of the right to live my life as I saw fit. As I sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the foghorn from the lighthouse and feeling the salt breeze on my face, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being apologetic about taking up space in the world. I was done allowing my own daughter to make me feel ashamed of finding joy in simple things. And I was definitely done being patient with people who showed me no respect while living in my property and avoiding their financial responsibilities. The next morning I called my lawyer. My lawyer, Patricia Henley, had been handling legal matters for our family since Tom and I bought our first house. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in real estate law and had seen every possible landlord-tenant dispute in her 25 years of practice. When I called her that Tuesday morning in March, she listened patiently as I explained the situation with Rachel and David's unpaid rent. "Eleanor, you've been more than generous," Patricia said after I finished outlining the timeline of missed payments. 3 months behind puts them in serious legal jeopardy. Most landlords would have started eviction proceedings after 30 days. The fact that their family doesn't change the legal obligations, and frankly, it sounds like they're taking advantage of your good nature. I had been hoping Patricia would tell me I was overreacting, that there was some middle ground that would preserve both my financial interests and my relationship with my daughter. Instead, she confirmed what I already knew but didn't want to admit. Rachel and David were treating me like a pushover, assuming that family ties would protect them from the consequences of their irresponsibility. Patricia walked me through the eviction process step by step. First, I would need to serve them with a formal notice to quit, giving them 7 days to pay the full amount owed or vacate the property. If they failed to comply, she would file the necessary paperwork with the court to begin formal eviction proceedings. The whole process could take anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, depending on their response and the court's schedule. "I have to warn you, Eleanor," Patricia said as we concluded our meeting. "Family evictions can get ugly. People say things they can't take back when money and housing are involved. Are you prepared for the possibility that this could permanently damage your relationship with Rachel?" I thought about her question for the rest of the day. Was I prepared to lose my daughter over $4,000 and a principal? The money itself wasn't going to make or break me, but the disrespect was eating away at something fundamental in our relationship. Rachel felt comfortable enough to criticize my life choices and call me foolish, but not responsible enough to pay her rent on time. She wanted to treat me like a child when it came to social media, but like a business when it came to housing. That evening, I decided to test the waters with a Facebook post that was more personal than usual. I shared a photo of Tom's old toolbox, which I had been organizing in the basement, along with a story about how he had taught me to change a tire, fix a leaky faucet, and handle basic home repairs. "Tom always said that independence meant being able to take care of yourself and your property," I wrote. "Some lessons become more important with age." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Dozens of friends shared their own memories of Tom, and several women my age commented about skills their husbands had taught them. Betty Morrison wrote a long comment about learning to use a chainsaw after her husband died, and how empowering it felt to handle her own tree trimming. The post generated the kind of meaningful conversation that had drawn me to social media in the first place. But within 2 hours, my phone was ringing. Rachel's voice was tight with irritation when I answered. "Mom, what was that post about? Are you having problems with the house? And why are you talking about Dad's tools on Facebook? That's private family business." I explained that I was simply sharing a memory and some practical wisdom, but Rachel wasn't satisfied. It sounds like you're having money problems or property issues. People are going to start asking questions about why you're suddenly talking about taking care of yourself. It makes our family look unstable. The conversation deteriorated from there. Rachel accused me of oversharing and seeking attention through dramatic posts. She said my social media presence was becoming increasingly erratic and that she was worried about my mental state. The irony was staggering. Here was a woman who owed me thousands of dollars, questioning my mental stability because I had posted a photo of a toolbox. Things escalated over the next 2 weeks. Every time I posted anything, Rachel found something to criticize. When I shared a photo of the first daffodils blooming in my garden, she called to ask why I was showing off my landscaping when other people were still dealing with snow. When I posted a recipe for corn chowder that several friends had requested, she accused me of trying to be some kind of cooking influencer and reminded me that people my age shouldn't be performing online. The breaking point came when I posted a simple photo of myself reading on the porch with a caption about enjoying the first warm day of spring. It was an innocent image, me in a comfortable sweater and reading glasses, with a cup of tea and one of my library books. I thought it captured the simple pleasure of a perfect Maine afternoon. Rachel's response was swift and harsh. She called within minutes, her voice sharper than I had ever heard it. "Mom, that photo is completely inappropriate. You look old and frail, and frankly, a little confused. People are going to think you're not taking care of yourself. I'm embarrassed that my friends might see their mother's friend looking like that. You need to delete it immediately." I looked at the photo again, trying to see what Rachel saw. I saw a woman enjoying a book and beautiful weather. I saw someone who looked her age, but was clearly alert, engaged, and content. I saw myself living my life without apology. But Rachel saw something shameful, something that reflected poorly on her. "Rachel," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'm not going to delete a photo of myself reading a book. There's nothing inappropriate about a 74-year-old woman enjoying literature on her own porch." "Mom, you don't understand how this looks to other people. You're too old to be posting selfies. It's attention-seeking behavior, and it's making our whole family look bad." David agrees with me. "We think you might be developing some kind of social media addiction, and we're concerned about your judgment." The accusation that I was mentally declining because I posted photos of flowers and books was the final insult. I had spent 40 years as a librarian, helping children develop critical thinking skills and a love of learning. I had managed household finances, maintained property, and navigated widowhood with grace and independence. But according to my daughter, sharing a photo of myself reading somehow indicated cognitive decline. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and really looked at my social media activity for the first time through Rachel's eyes. What I saw was a woman staying connected with her community, sharing knowledge and memories, and documenting the beauty of everyday life in coastal Maine. What Rachel apparently saw was an embarrassing old woman making a fool of herself online. But there was something else brewing beneath Rachel's criticism, something that became clear when David called me the next day. His tone was casual, almost friendly, as he asked about my social media concerns and whether I had considered taking a break from posting for a while. He suggested that I might benefit from focusing on offline activities and spending less time seeking validation from online strangers. Then, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned that they were working on getting caught up with the rent and hoped I would be patient a little while longer. The connection was clear. They wanted me to be quiet, compliant, and grateful for their presence in my life, while they continued to avoid their financial responsibilities. I realized that this wasn't really about social media at all, it was about control. Rachel and David wanted to shape my behavior to fit their comfort level, while expecting me to subsidize their lifestyle through free housing. They wanted me to act like a grateful, submissive elderly mother who knew her place and didn't cause any inconvenience or embarrassment. The next day, I made another post, this one more pointed than usual. I shared a photo of the duplex I owned, a beautiful old Victorian that Tom and I had restored over the years. "Property ownership comes with both privileges and responsibilities," I wrote. "It's amazing how some people understand the privileges but struggle with the responsibilities." Within an hour, Rachel was at my door, her face flushed with anger. "What was that supposed to mean?" she demanded as soon as I let her in. "Are you trying to embarrass us on social media now? Are you threatening us?" I invited her to sit down, but she remained standing in my living room, her arms crossed and her voice rising. "Mom, if you have something to say about our living situation, you need to say it to us directly, not post cryptic messages on Facebook for the whole town to see." That post was completely inappropriate and passive-aggressive. "Rachel," I said quietly, "you've been telling me for months that I'm too old for social media and that my posts are embarrassing, but when I post something you don't like, suddenly it's important enough for you to drive over here immediately. Which is it? Am I a foolish old woman whose online presence doesn't matter, or am I influential enough to embarrass you with a single post?" She didn't have an answer for that. Instead, she launched into another lecture about appropriate behavior for seniors and how my recent posts were concerning from a mental health perspective. She suggested that I might benefit from, quote, professional evaluation to determine if I was competent to manage my own affairs. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Rachel was suggesting that my social media activity could be used as evidence that I was mentally unfit to manage my own property and finances. It was a dangerous game, considering that she and David were living in my property and owed me significant money. After Rachel left, I called Patricia again. I described the conversation and asked about the legal implications of Rachel's suggestion that I might need professional evaluation. Patricia's response was immediate and clear. "Eleanor, that sounds like the beginning of an elder abuse case. If Rachel is threatening your financial autonomy based on your social media activity, while simultaneously defaulting on rent payments to you, that's a serious red flag. We need to document everything, and we need to move forward with the eviction process immediately. This isn't just about money anymore, it's about protecting your legal rights." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house Tom and I had built together, looking at the photos on the walls, the furniture we had chosen, the rooms where we had raised our children. I thought about the decades of sacrifice and hard work that had gone into creating a stable, comfortable life. I thought about the plans Tom and I had made for our retirement, the dreams we had shared about traveling and enjoying our golden years together. Tom never got to see those golden years, but I was living them. I was healthy, mentally sharp, financially secure, and engaged with my community. I had hobbies I enjoyed, friends who valued my contributions, and a sense of purpose that came from staying connected to the world around me. Rachel's attempts to shame me for participating in modern life weren't going to succeed. But I also realized that patience and family loyalty had been mistaken for weakness. By allowing Rachel and David to avoid their financial responsibilities while criticizing my life choices, I had enabled a dynamic that was ultimately harmful to everyone involved. They needed to learn that actions have consequences, and I needed to stop allowing my love for them to override my respect for myself. The next morning, I drove to Patricia's office and signed the papers for a 7-day notice to quit. It was time for Rachel and David to decide whether they wanted to be responsible tenants or find somewhere else to live. And it was time for me to stop being afraid of disappointing people who had no qualms about disappointing me. The notice would be served the following Monday. I had 1 week to prepare for a confrontation that would either restore mutual respect to our relationship or end it entirely. Either way, I was done being ashamed of who I was and how I chose to live my life. The weekend before I was supposed to serve the eviction notice felt like the longest of my life. I moved through my daily routines like a ghost, making coffee I barely tasted, tending flowers I couldn't really see, and sitting on my porch watching the harbor without processing the familiar rhythm of boats coming and going. The weight of what I was about to do pressed down on me like the thick fog that sometimes rolled in from the Atlantic, blanketing everything in gray uncertainty. Saturday morning, I woke up at 4:30, 2 hours before my usual time, with my heart racing and my mind spinning through endless scenarios. What if Rachel was right? What if I was some pathetic old woman clinging to relevance through social media? What if serving that eviction notice destroyed not just my relationship with Rachel, but with Emma and Jack too? What if they grew up thinking their grandmother was cruel and vindictive, the woman who threw their family out on the street over money? I made tea and sat at my kitchen table, watching the sky slowly lighten over Penobscot Bay. The early morning light had always been my favorite time of day, when the world felt clean and full of possibilities. But that morning, everything looked different. The harbor seemed smaller, lonelier. The familiar sounds of gulls and distant boat engines felt mournful, rather than comforting. Even my own kitchen, the heart of the home Tom and I had built together, felt foreign and unwelcoming. I found myself questioning everything. Maybe Rachel was protecting me from something I couldn't see. Maybe my social media posts really were inappropriate for someone my age. Maybe I was too old to understand how the modern world worked, and my daughter's harsh words came from a place of genuine concern rather than embarrassment. The doubt crept in like cold water seeping through a foundation crack, slow but persistent, and ultimately damaging. I pulled out my laptop and scrolled through my recent Facebook posts, trying to see them through Rachel's eyes. There was the photo of me reading on the porch that had triggered her latest lecture. I studied my face in the image, looking for signs of the frailty and confusion she claimed to see. What I saw was a woman wearing reading glasses and a comfortable sweater, holding a book and smiling slightly at the camera. My hair was silver and styled neatly, my posture was straight, and my eyes were clear and alert. But maybe I was too close to see what others saw. Maybe Rachel could perceive some decline that I was blind to. Then I looked at the comments on that post. Mrs. Patterson from down the street had written, "You look so peaceful and content, Eleanor. That book looks interesting. What are you reading?" My former colleague from the library had responded, "Goals for retirement. You're living your best life." Betty Morrison had added, "Love seeing you enjoy these beautiful spring days. Tom would be so happy to see you thriving." These didn't sound like the responses to an embarrassing or inappropriate post. They sounded like the comments of people who saw exactly what I thought they would see, a woman enjoying a quiet moment on a beautiful day. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing in the fertile soil of my exhaustion and confusion. Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Emma knocked on my door just after 9, holding a small bouquet of daffodils she had picked from her school's garden. At 14, she was becoming a lovely young woman, with Rachel's dark hair and her grandfather's kind eyes. She also had an intelligence and emotional maturity that sometimes surprised me. "Hi, Grandma," she said, offering me the flowers. "I wanted to give you these before things get weird." I invited her in and put the daffodils in a small vase, uncertain what she meant by weird. Emma settled into the armchair where her grandfather used to read his evening paper, and I could see both Tom and Rachel in her features and mannerisms. "Mom's been really stressed about money," Emma said without preamble. "She and Dad argue about it every night after Jack and I go to bed, but we can hear them anyway. She keeps saying they need to find a cheaper place to live, but Dad says they can't afford to move because they don't have money for deposits and moving trucks." My heart sank. I had hoped that Rachel and David were shielding the children from their financial problems, but apparently Emma was more aware of the situation than anyone realized. "Mom also talks about you a lot," Emma continued, fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. "She says you're acting strange lately, posting too much on Facebook, and making the family look bad. But Grandma, I see your posts. My friends think they're sweet." Sarah's grandmother never shares anything about her life, and we don't really know her very well. But we know you. We know about your garden, and your recipes and the birds that come to your feeder. Emma paused, looking out the window toward the harbor. "I don't understand why Mom thinks you're embarrassing us. You're just being yourself. And the photos you post aren't weird or inappropriate. They're just normal grandmother stuff." Her words should have been comforting, but instead they made me feel worse. Here was a 14-year-old girl who could see the situation more clearly than her mother, and she was caught in the middle of an adult conflict that was about to explode into something much uglier. "Emma," I said carefully, "you know that your parents need to pay rent to live in the duplex, right? It's not free, even though I'm your grandmother." She nodded solemnly. "I know. I heard Mom tell Dad that you're being patient with them, but that they can't count on it forever. She said family business should stay private. And that's why she doesn't want you posting about taking care of property and stuff. She thinks people will figure out that we're behind on rent. The clarity of Emma's understanding was both impressive and heartbreaking. At 14, she grasped the financial and social dynamics at play better than her parents seemed to. She understood that her mother's criticism of my social media posts was driven by fear of exposure, not genuine concern about appropriateness. "Grandma," Emma said quietly, "are you going to make us move?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I looked at this beautiful, perceptive young woman who had inherited the best qualities of both her parents and her grandfather, and I felt the full weight of the decision I was facing. Whatever I did would affect her life, her stability, her relationship with her parents, and her memories of me. "I don't want to make anyone move, sweetheart," I said finally, "but I also can't let people treat me disrespectfully while I'm helping them. It's complicated." Emma nodded again, with the serious expression of someone much older than her years. "I think Mom's scared," she said, "not just about money, but about getting older and not being in control of things. She talks about how everything's changing too fast, and how she doesn't understand why people our age need to be online all the time. But I think she's really worried about what happens when she gets old, and whether we'll take care of her the way she's supposed to take care of you." The insight was stunning. Emma had identified something I hadn't fully recognized myself. Rachel's criticism of my social media activity might be rooted in her own fears about aging, relevance, and dependence. She was 46, watching her children grow up and her parents grow old, struggling financially and professionally, and facing the reality that she was closer to my stage of life than to Emma's. But fear didn't excuse cruelty, and anxiety about the future didn't justify disrespect in the present. Rachel's psychological state might explain her behavior, but it didn't make that behavior acceptable. After Emma left, I spent the rest of Sunday in deep reflection. I walked along the breakwater, something I had done thousands of times over the decades, letting the rhythm of waves against granite help organize my thoughts. The familiar path felt different that day, like I was seeing it for the last time, or perhaps seeing it clearly for the first time in years. I thought about the woman I had been before Tom died, the couple we had been together. We had raised 3 children, built a successful life, and faced challenges as a team. Tom had been my partner in every sense, supporting my decisions and trusting my judgment. He had never made me feel foolish or inappropriate for pursuing interests he didn't share. When I went back to college in my 40s to get my library science degree, he encouraged me, even though it meant sacrifice and change for our family. Tom had also been the one to suggest buying the duplex as rental property, recognizing it as both an investment and a way to help family members when they needed housing. He had been clear about the business aspects of landlording, even with relatives. "Blood doesn't pay the mortgage," he used to say. "If we're going to help family, we need to be smart about it, not sentimental." I realized that in trying to honor Tom's memory by being generous with Rachel and David, I had forgotten his practical wisdom about maintaining boundaries. He would have addressed the late rent payments months ago, not out of greed but out of respect for the financial discipline that had allowed us to help others in the first place. That evening, I did something I hadn't done since Tom's funeral. I opened the wooden box where I kept his personal papers and pulled out the folder containing his thoughts about retirement and estate planning. Tom had been methodical about everything, including his hopes and concerns about how our assets would be handled after his death. Among his notes, I found a letter he had written to me but never given, apparently intending it to be found after his death. The envelope was addressed, "For Eleanor, when you need to remember who you are." I opened it with trembling hands. "My dearest Eleanor," the letter began in his careful handwriting, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you're facing some difficult decision about our family or our property. I know you, and I know you're probably second-guessing yourself and worrying about disappointing people who matter to you. Remember that you are the strongest, wisest, most capable woman I've ever known. You raised our children to be independent adults, not dependent ones. You taught them that respect is earned, not inherited, and that family love doesn't mean avoiding consequences for poor choices. Don't let anyone, including our children, treat you as less than the remarkable woman you are just because you're getting older. Age brings wisdom, not weakness. Don't apologize for taking up space in the world, for having opinions, or for expecting to be treated with dignity. The duplex was always meant to be an investment, not a charity. If family members can't respect both the financial and personal boundaries that come with that arrangement, they need to find other housing. This isn't cruelty, it's common sense. You have given so much to so many people over the years. You deserve to spend your remaining time with people who value you, not people who take you for granted. Trust yourself, my love. You know what's right. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Tom had known me well enough to anticipate exactly the kind of situation I was facing, and his words cut through all the doubt and confusion that had been plaguing me for weeks. But even with Tom's posthumous support, the decision to proceed with the eviction felt enormous. I was about to take an action that could fundamentally change my relationship with my daughter and grandchildren. I was about to prioritize my own dignity over family harmony. I was about to stop being the accommodating mother and grandmother everyone expected me to be. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical April weather in coastal Maine. I had barely slept, and I felt like I was moving underwater as I got dressed and prepared breakfast. The eviction notice sat on my kitchen counter in a manila envelope, ready to be served. Patricia had arranged for a process server to deliver it that afternoon, which would make the action official and legally binding. At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Rachel, and her tone was different from our recent conversations, softer and more conciliatory. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation the other day, and I want to apologize if I seemed harsh. I know you're just trying to stay connected with people, and I appreciate that social media helps you do that. David and I have been under a lot of stress lately, and I think I took some of that out on you unfairly. I listened to her words, hearing what sounded like a genuine attempt at reconciliation. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe we could resolve this without the nuclear option of eviction proceedings. I also wanted to let you know that we're going to get caught up on the rent this week, Rachel continued. David got a commission check that was bigger than expected, and we can pay you everything we owe plus next month's rent. I know we've been behind, and I'm sorry about that too. The timing was suspicious. Somehow, after months of financial struggle, David had suddenly received a windfall large enough to cover over $5,000 in back rent, exactly when legal action was imminent. It was possible, but it seemed more likely that Rachel had learned about the eviction notice through some other channel and was scrambling to head it off. That's good news, Rachel, I said carefully. I'll be happy to receive the payment. There's just one thing, Mom. I hope we can agree that our family business should stay private. I mean, now that we're getting the money situation sorted out, maybe you could avoid posting things about property ownership and responsibilities. It makes people ask questions, and it's embarrassing for David and me. There it was. The apology was conditional. Rachel was willing to pay the rent, but only if I agreed to censor my social media activity according to her preferences. She was treating my silence as something she could purchase, like a service or commodity. I post about a lot of things, Rachel. My garden, my reading, local history, memories of your father. I don't plan to change that. I'm not asking you to stop posting, Mom. Just to be more thoughtful about what you share, some things should stay private. Who decides what should stay private? There was a pause. Well, common sense decides. People our age understand discretion. The phrase "people our age" stung. Rachel was lumping herself in with me, as if 46 and 74 were equivalent stages of life, as if her judgment about discretion was automatically superior to mine, because we were both older than her children. Rachel, I've lived in this town for 74 years. I've been married, raised children, worked a career, and managed property. I think I understand discretion. What you're asking for isn't discretion, it's censorship. Mom, you're being dramatic. I'm just asking you to think before you post things that could affect other people. I always think before I post. But I won't run my thoughts through a filter designed to protect people from the consequences of their own choices. The conversation ended badly, with Rachel accusing me of being stubborn and selfish, and me realizing that her apology had been a manipulation tactic, rather than genuine remorse. That afternoon, the process server knocked on Rachel's door, I watched from my kitchen window as he handed her the envelope containing the 7-day notice to quit. Even from a distance, I could see her body language change as she read the document. Her shoulders sagged, then stiffened. She looked toward my house, and for a moment, our eyes met across the space between our properties. The phone rang within minutes. "How could you do this?" Rachel's voice was shaking with fury. "How could you have us evicted without even discussing it with us first? What kind of mother does this to her own daughter?" "The kind of mother who owns property and expects rent to be paid on time," I replied. "The kind of mother who won't accept disrespect as payment for housing." "This is about the Facebook thing, isn't it? You're retaliating against us because I criticized your social media posts. This is petty and vindictive, Mom. Dad would be ashamed of you." The invocation of Tom's name was the final insult. Rachel was claiming to know what her deceased father would think about a situation she had created through her own irresponsibility and disrespect. "Your father believed that family members should be held to higher standards, not lower ones," I said. "He believed that people who can't pay their bills should find cheaper housing, not expect subsidies from relatives they treat poorly. We offered to pay you today. After 3 months of excuses and after I filed legal papers. That's not responsibility, Rachel. That's damage control." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, growing uglier with each exchange. Rachel accused me of elder abuse, of being mentally unstable, of destroying the family over money. I responded that I was protecting myself from people who felt entitled to my property and my silence. When I finally hung up, I sat in my quiet kitchen and wondered if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in months. A sense of clarity and personal power. I had stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. That night, I made myself a simple dinner and ate it slowly, savoring each bite. I had spent too many meals recently choking down food while processing stress and confusion. Tonight, the chowder tasted like comfort, and the homemade bread felt like an achievement. I didn't post anything on social media that day. Not because Rachel had intimidated me into silence, but because I needed to sit with my own thoughts without sharing them. I needed to be present in my own life without documenting it for others. But as I prepared for bed, I realized that tomorrow I would post again. I would share whatever brought me joy or seemed worth sharing, without filtering it through anyone else's shame or fear. I would be myself, unapologetically and completely. The crisis had passed. I knew who I was, and I knew what I would and wouldn't accept from others. Whatever happened next, I would face it from a position of strength, rather than apology. The 7 days following the eviction notice felt like living in a pressure cooker. Every morning I woke up wondering if this would be the day Rachel and David would either pay what they owed or pack their belongings. Every afternoon I checked my mailbox hoping for a certified letter with payment, and every evening I went to bed knowing the standoff was continuing. On Wednesday, David knocked on my door just after lunch. I could see him through the peephole, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. When I opened the door, his usual insurance salesman confidence had evaporated, replaced by the desperate charm of someone who knew his back was against the wall. "Eleanor, we need to talk," he said, not waiting for an invitation before stepping into my living room. "This whole situation has gotten completely out of hand, and I think there's been some miscommunication." I gestured for him to sit down, but he remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back in a pose that probably worked well when he was trying to sell life insurance policies. David had always struck me as someone who believed he could talk his way out of any problem, a man who confused charisma with character. "The thing is," he continued, launching into what sounded like a rehearsed speech, "Rachel and I never realized you were so concerned about the rent timeline. We've always thought of our arrangement as more of a family understanding than a strict business transaction. I mean, we're not strangers here, we're your daughter and son-in-law." I let him continue his performance, watching as he employed every sales tactic in his arsenal. He spoke about market conditions affecting his commission income, about unexpected expenses with the children's school activities, about how much they loved living close to me, and how beneficial it was for Emma and Jack to have their grandmother nearby. "We've been working on a payment plan," David said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his shirt pocket. "We can get you caught up over the next 3 months, with interest, of course. It's all laid out here, very professional and organized." I took the paper and examined his proposed payment schedule. According to his calculations, they would pay me $600 per month for the next 8 months to cover the back rent, while continuing to pay the current monthly rent of $800. It was a plan that would require them to pay $1,400 per month going forward, which seemed unlikely given that they had struggled to pay $800 consistently. "David," I said, setting the paper on my coffee table, "if you can afford to pay $1,400 a month starting now, why couldn't you afford to pay $800 a month for the past 3 months?" He launched into another explanation involving timing and cash flow and the cyclical nature of insurance sales. It was impressive in its complexity and creativity, but it didn't answer my question. The truth was that David and Rachel had prioritized other expenses over rent because they assumed I would be endlessly patient with family members. "Here's what I don't understand," I continued. "You and Rachel have been very concerned about my social media posts, worried that I might embarrass the family or reveal private information. But you're perfectly comfortable being 3 months behind on rent to a 74-year-old widow. Which behavior do you think reflects more poorly on our family?" David's confident demeanor cracked slightly. "Eleanor, that's not fair. Our financial situation is temporary, and it's private. Your Facebook posts are public and permanent. So is the county court record that will be created when I have to formally evict you." The threat hung in the air between us. David's face flushed red, and for the first time in our conversation, he looked genuinely angry rather than just desperate. "You would really do that to us? You would really drag your own family through a public eviction process over money that we're trying to pay you? I would really hold my own family to the same standards I would hold any tenant. Maybe higher standards, actually, since family members should understand respect and responsibility better than strangers." David left my house that afternoon without the friendly reconciliation he had obviously hoped to achieve. As I watched him walk back to the duplex, I could see him talking animatedly on his cell phone, probably reporting back to Rachel about the failure of his diplomatic mission. That evening, I received a text message from Emma. "Grandma, can I come over tomorrow after school? I want to show you something." I texted back that she was always welcome, but I wondered what was behind her request. The adult drama had been spilling over into the children's lives, and I worried about the stress they were experiencing. Emma arrived on Thursday with her backpack and a manila folder tucked under her arm. She seemed more serious than usual, with a determined expression that reminded me of Rachel at that age when she had made up her mind about something. "Grandma, I need to show you some things, but first I want you to promise that you won't get mad at me for snooping." I promised, curious about what she had discovered, and concerned about what kind of situation would require a 14-year-old to become a detective in her own home. Emma pulled several printed pages from her folder and spread them on my kitchen table. They appeared to be screenshots of text message conversations and bank statements, though I couldn't immediately understand their significance. "I've been listening to Mom and Dad argue every night," Emma explained, "and some of the things they're saying don't make sense. So I started paying attention to their conversations and looking at papers they left out." She pointed to the first screenshot, which showed a text conversation between Rachel and someone named Jennifer. In the messages, Rachel was complaining about having to pay rent to her controlling mother and asking if Jennifer knew of any cheaper apartments available immediately. "Mom's been looking for a new place to live for 2 weeks," Emma said. "She's not planning to pay you the back rent at all. She's planning to move out before the eviction goes through, so she won't have an eviction on her record." The revelation was stunning, though it probably shouldn't have been. Rachel's sudden willingness to pay everything she owed had been too convenient to be believable. She was apparently playing for time while arranging alternative housing, hoping to leave me holding the bag for months of unpaid rent. Emma showed me another screenshot, this one from a conversation between Rachel and David. In it, Rachel was discussing whether they should, quote, "just tell Eleanor we're moving to teach her a lesson about respecting family." David's response was that they should, quote, "make sure she understands that her social media behavior has consequences." "They're going to pretend they're choosing to leave because of your Facebook posts," Emma said. "They want you to think that losing us is punishment for embarrassing them online." The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. Rachel and David were planning to abandon their financial obligations while simultaneously making me feel guilty about driving them away through my inappropriate behavior. They wanted to be both the victims of my unreasonable expectations and the arbiters of my social media conduct. But Emma wasn't finished. She pulled out a bank statement that showed a large deposit from the previous week, the same week Rachel had claimed David received an unexpected commission check. "This isn't from Dad's work," Emma said, pointing to the deposit description. "It's from Mom's brother, Uncle Steve. They borrowed money from him, but they're not using it to pay you back. They're using it for deposits on a new apartment." The final piece of Emma's evidence was the most damaging. She showed me a screenshot of Rachel's own Facebook post, shared in a private group called Difficult Parents Support. In the post, Rachel described me as increasingly erratic and controlling and asked for advice about protecting children from grandparents who are experiencing cognitive decline. "Mom's been telling her friends that you're losing your memory and making poor decisions," Emma said quietly. "She's been building a case that you're not mentally competent, so that when they move out, people will think it's because you're getting senile, not because they couldn't pay rent." I stared at the evidence Emma had gathered, feeling a mixture of admiration for her detective skills and horror at what she had uncovered. My daughter wasn't just avoiding her financial responsibilities or trying to control my social media presence. She was actively working to destroy my reputation in our community, painting me as a mentally declining elder who was becoming a burden to her family. The cruelty of it was almost incomprehensible. Rachel was willing to damage my standing in the town where I had lived my entire life, among people who had known me for decades, in order to cover up her own irresponsibility. She was using my age as a weapon against me, counting on people's assumptions about elderly decline to make her version of events seem plausible. "Emma," I said carefully, "why are you showing me this? You could get in serious trouble with your parents for snooping through their private conversations." She looked at me with those wise eyes that seemed too old for her face. "Because it's not right, Grandma. You're not senile or controlling or any of the things Mom's saying about you. You're just expecting people to pay their bills and treat you with respect. If I were in your position, I would want to know what was really happening." Emma paused, fidgeting with the edge of the bank statement. "Also, I'm worried about what happens to Jack and me if Mom and Dad keep making these kinds of decisions. If they'll lie to you and steal from you, what else will they do when they're desperate?" The question revealed a level of insight that was both impressive and heartbreaking. Emma was beginning to understand that her parents' moral flexibility wasn't limited to their treatment of me. She was starting to worry about her own vulnerability in a household where financial pressure and poor judgment were creating increasingly desperate behavior. "What do you think I should do with this information?" I asked her. "I think you should protect yourself," she said without hesitation. "I think you should make sure everyone knows the truth before Mom can spread more lies about you. And I think you should stop being nice to people who aren't being nice to you." That evening, after Emma went home, I called Patricia and described what my granddaughter had discovered. Patricia's response was immediate and decisive. "Eleanor, this changes everything. We're not just dealing with unpaid rent anymore, we're dealing with fraud and defamation. Rachel is borrowing money under false pretenses, while simultaneously destroying your reputation. We need to document everything and consider filing additional legal actions beyond the eviction." Patricia explained that Rachel's Facebook posts about my alleged cognitive decline could constitute elder abuse, particularly if they were being used to manipulate other people's perceptions of my competency. The fact that she was simultaneously defaulting on financial obligations to me while spreading rumors about my mental state created a pattern that courts took very seriously. "I want you to screenshot every one of your recent Facebook posts," Patricia instructed. "We need to create a record of your actual social media activity so we can contrast it with Rachel's claims about erratic behavior. Your posts will speak for themselves in terms of demonstrating your mental clarity and emotional stability." I spent that evening compiling a folder of my recent Facebook activity. Looking at 3 months' worth of posts, I saw a clear pattern of coherent, thoughtful content. Photos of my garden with detailed captions about planting techniques. Recipes shared with friends who had requested them. Historical photos of Rockland with informative descriptions of how the town had changed over the decades. Comments on friends' posts that were supportive and relevant. There was nothing in my social media presence that suggested confusion, inappropriate behavior, or declining mental capacity. My posts were well written, logically organized, and consistent with someone who was engaged with her community and interested in maintaining connections with friends and neighbors. But I also realized that Rachel's accusations had poisoned my own perception of my online activity. Her constant criticism had made me second-guess every post, every photo, every comment. I had started to see my own content through the lens of her disapproval, looking for signs of the embarrassment and inappropriateness she claimed to detect. Now, with the clarity that came from understanding her true motivations, I could see that there had never been anything wrong with my social media presence. Rachel's criticism hadn't been about protecting me from embarrassment or helping me navigate digital etiquette. It had been about controlling my voice and limiting my ability to share my perspective on our family dynamics. Friday morning brought an unexpected development. I was having coffee on my porch when I saw a moving truck pull up in front of the duplex. Two men began carrying boxes and furniture out of Rachel and David's side of the building, loading everything into the truck with efficient speed. I watched from my porch as my daughter supervised the move, directing the workers and checking items off a clipboard. She was dressed in work clothes and had her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking younger and more energetic than I had seen her in months. The stress that had been etched on her face during our recent conversations seemed to have evaporated, replaced by the focused activity of someone executing a well-planned escape. David was nowhere to be seen, probably at work, and maintaining plausible deniability about the timing of their departure. Rachel was handling the move by herself, with help only from the professional movers and Jack, who was carrying small boxes and looking confused about the sudden upheaval. I considered going over to talk to her, to ask about their plans and whether they intended to fulfill their financial obligations before leaving, but I realized that any conversation would be pointless. Rachel had made her choices and was implementing her exit strategy. She was leaving without paying what she owed, and she would undoubtedly frame her departure as a principled response to my unreasonable behavior. Instead, I did something that felt both spontaneous and inevitable. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the moving truck, with Rachel clearly visible directing the workers. Then I posted it on Facebook with a caption that was brief and factual. Some tenants choose to move rather than pay rent. The duplex will be available for responsible renters soon. I tagged the local real estate group and several community pages, ensuring that people in Rockland would see the post and understand the situation. Within minutes, comments began appearing from friends and neighbors who understood exactly what was happening. Betty Morrison wrote, "Sorry you're dealing with difficult tenants, Eleanor. You deserve better than that." My former colleague from the library commented, "Reliable renters are hard to find, but you'll get good people in there." Mrs. Patterson added, "Some people have no respect for property owners. Good luck with the next tenants." The comments made it clear that my friends and neighbors saw the situation as a straightforward case of irresponsible tenants defaulting on their obligations. Nobody was questioning my mental competency or suggesting that I was being unreasonable. The community consensus was that I was a property owner dealing with problematic renters, nothing more or less. An hour later, my phone rang. Rachel's voice was shaking with fury when I answered. "How dare you post that picture? How dare you embarrass us on social media like that? Everyone in town is going to see it and know our business." "Everyone in town can see the moving truck in front of your house," I replied calmly. "I just provided some context about why it's there. You had no right to air our private family business on Facebook. This is exactly the kind of inappropriate social media behavior we've been trying to help you understand. Rachel, you've been posting about me in your support group, telling people I'm mentally declining and making poor decisions. You've been spreading lies about my competency while defaulting on rent payments. Which one of us is actually airing inappropriate family business online?" There was a long pause. I could hear the sounds of the move continuing in the background, boxes being loaded and furniture being wrapped. "I don't know what you're talking about," Rachel said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. "Emma showed me the screenshots. I know about the borrowed money from Steve, the apartment search, the plan to leave without paying, and the Facebook posts about my alleged cognitive decline. I know all of it." Another pause, longer this time. When Rachel spoke again, her tone had shifted from anger to something colder and more calculated. "If you think you can turn my own daughter against me, you're more manipulative than I thought. Emma is a child, And children don't understand adult relationships and financial complexity. Emma understands honesty and responsibility better than you give her credit for. She also understands loyalty and respect, which is why she was uncomfortable watching you lie about me while living in my property. This isn't over, Mom. You think you've won something here, but you've destroyed our relationship over money. You've chosen property ownership over being a grandmother. Emma and Jack are going to grow up knowing that their grandmother cared more about rent checks than family. Emma and Jack are going to grow up knowing that their grandmother expected adults to honor their commitments and treat her with respect. They're going to learn that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, and that family relationships require mutual consideration. Rachel hung up without saying goodbye. I sat on my porch for another hour, watching the movers finish loading the truck and drive away. By noon, the duplex was empty, and Rachel and David were gone from my life as suddenly as they had tried to exit their financial obligations. That afternoon, I received a text from Emma. We're staying at a hotel tonight, then moving to our new apartment tomorrow. I wanted you to know that I don't blame you for any of this. I love you, Grandma. I texted back. I love you too, sweetheart. You know where to find me when you need me. As evening approached, I walked through the empty duplex, assessing the condition they had left it in and planning the repairs and improvements I would make before renting it to new tenants. The space felt different without their belongings and their tension, lighter and more peaceful. I realized that I wasn't sad about their departure. I was relieved. The constant stress of managing their disrespect while subsidizing their housing had been exhausting. The fear of disappointing them had prevented me from protecting myself. Their absence felt like freedom rather than loss. That night, I made myself a celebratory dinner and posted a photo of it on Facebook. Treating myself to lobster and champagne tonight. Sometimes life calls for small celebrations. The post received dozens of likes and supportive comments, a reminder that I had a community of people who valued my presence in their lives. I had been tested, and I had chosen self-respect over family harmony. I had refused to accept mistreatment in exchange for the illusion of closeness. I had stopped apologizing for expecting basic decency from people who wanted to benefit from my generosity. The test was over, and I had passed. The weeks following Rachel and David's departure unfolded like a slow exhale, after holding my breath for months. I had expected to feel hollow or regretful, the way you might after ending a long relationship or leaving a familiar job. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete ownership of my own life. No one was monitoring my social media posts for signs of embarrassment. No one was questioning my judgment or suggesting I needed professional evaluation. No one was treating my home like a charity while simultaneously treating me like a burden. The duplex renovation became my first major project. I hired local contractors to update the kitchen, refinish the hardwood floors, and paint every room in colors that reflected coastal Maine rather than the bland neutrals Rachel had preferred. I chose deep blues and weathered grays, colors that reminded me of the harbor at different times of day. The work took 3 weeks, and I documented every stage on Facebook, sharing before and after photos that showcased the transformation. The response from my online community was enthusiastic and supportive. Betty Morrison commented that the updated kitchen looked like something from a home improvement magazine. Mrs. Patterson wrote that she knew several young families who would love to live in such a beautifully maintained property. My former library colleagues shared the posts in their own networks, helping me reach potential tenants who appreciated both quality housing and responsible landlords. Within a month, I had 5 serious inquiries about renting the duplex. I chose a young couple named Sarah and Michael Chen, both teachers at the local elementary school. They were quiet, respectful people who understood the value of community connection and property maintenance. During our interview, Sarah mentioned that she had seen my Facebook posts about the renovation and was impressed by the attention to detail and care I had put into the project. We've been looking for a place owned by someone who takes pride in their property, Michael added. Your social media posts made it clear that you're the kind of landlord who maintains things properly and treats tenants with respect. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same social media presence that Rachel had criticized as embarrassing and inappropriate had attracted exactly the kind of tenants I wanted: people who valued quality, community engagement, and mutual respect. Sarah and Michael moved in on a bright October morning, bringing houseplants and homemade cookies as a thank you gift. Their first month's rent was paid a week early, along with a security deposit and references from previous landlords. The contrast with Rachel and David's approach to tenancy couldn't have been more stark. As autumn settled over Rockland, I established new routines that reflected my newfound freedom. I joined a book club at the library, something I had always wanted to do but never found time for when I was managing the constant drama of Rachel's criticism and financial irresponsibility. I started volunteering at the local historical society, helping to digitize old photographs and documents that told the story of our town's maritime heritage. My social media posts evolved too, becoming more confident and less filtered through anticipation of disapproval. I shared photos of my volunteer work, stories about Rockland's history, and updates about my garden as it prepared for winter. I posted pictures of Emma and Jack when they visited, which happened more frequently than I had dared to hope. The children's relationship with the situation surprised me. Rather than being angry about the conflict between their parents and me, they seemed relieved to have the tension resolved. Emma later told me that the constant arguing about money and my social media posts had made their home feel unstable and anxious. The move to a smaller apartment had actually improved their family dynamic because Rachel and David were no longer stressed about rent they couldn't afford. David found a new job with a more predictable salary, and Rachel's real estate business began to recover as the local market improved. Without the pressure of paying rent they couldn't afford while maintaining appearances they couldn't sustain, they were able to rebuild their financial foundation on a more realistic basis. The first time Rachel called me after the move, it was Thanksgiving evening. Her voice was hesitant, almost formal, as if she were calling a distant relative rather than her mother. "Mom, I wanted to let you know that we're doing well in the new place. The kids are adjusting fine, and David's new job is working out better than expected." "I'm glad to hear that," I replied, meaning it sincerely. Despite everything that had happened, I didn't want my daughter to struggle or fail. I wanted her to find stability and happiness, just not at my expense. I also wanted to say that I understand why you did what you did. I didn't understand it at the time, and I was angry about the way it happened, but I can see now that we weren't being fair to you. The acknowledgement was more than I had expected, and it felt genuine rather than manipulative. Rachel's tone was different from our previous conversations, less defensive and more thoughtful. "I think we both made some mistakes," I said carefully. "But I'm grateful that we can talk about it now without so much anger." Emma told me about the screenshots she showed you. I was horrified when I realized what she had done, but then I looked at those Facebook posts I had written about you, and I was more horrified by what I had written. I don't know why I thought it was appropriate to discuss our family problems with strangers online, while criticizing you for posting pictures of your garden. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, the longest we had talked without conflict in over a year. Rachel apologized for the Facebook posts about my alleged cognitive decline, acknowledging that they were unfair and potentially damaging. She explained that the financial pressure had made her feel desperate and defensive, leading her to lash out at me rather than address the real problems in her own life. I apologized for posting the photo of the moving truck, admitting that it was more vindictive than necessary, even though the information was factually accurate. We agreed that both of us had used social media inappropriately during our conflict, and that family disagreements should be handled more directly and privately. The conversation didn't solve everything, and we didn't immediately return to our previous closeness, but it established a foundation for rebuilding our relationship based on honesty and mutual respect rather than obligation and resentment. Over the winter months, I began dating someone for the first time since Tom's death. Harold Fitzgerald was a retired Coast Guard captain who had moved to Rockland to be closer to his own grandchildren. We met at a community lecture about lighthouse preservation, bonded over our shared love of Maine's maritime history, and discovered that we both enjoyed the kind of quiet companionship that comes with age and experience. Harold understood social media better than Tom ever had, having used it to stay connected with former colleagues scattered across the country. He encouraged my online activity and often appeared in my posts, holding lobsters we had cooked together or standing beside historical markers we had visited during our walks around town. I don't understand people who think seniors should disappear from public life just because we're over 70, Harold said one evening as we were reviewing photos from a day trip to Camden. We've got more interesting stories and better perspective than most young people. Why should we hide that online? His support felt wonderful, but more importantly, I realized I no longer needed anyone's permission to participate in the digital world. I posted what interested me, shared what brought me joy, and connected with people who appreciated my contributions. If someone found my content inappropriate or embarrassing, that said more about their comfort with aging than it did about my social media etiquette. Spring brought new developments that validated my decision to prioritize self-respect over family harmony. Sarah and Michael Chen turned out to be ideal tenants, maintaining the property beautifully and becoming genuine friends rather than just rental income. Their rent payments arrived promptly each month, often accompanied by small gifts from their garden or updates about their work at the school. Emma graduated from middle school with honors and was accepted into the advanced placement program at Rockland High School. She visited me regularly, often bringing friends who were curious about my stories of old Rockland and impressed by my social media presence. These teenagers didn't find my online activity embarrassing or inappropriate. They found it engaging and authentic. "Your grandmother is cooler than most adults," one of Emma's friends told her after a visit where I had shown them historical photos of the town and shared stories about the fishing industry in the 1960s. "She actually listens to what we're saying and doesn't treat us like we're stupid." Jack started playing Little League baseball, and I attended his games when my schedule allowed. His coaches often approached me after games, having seen my Facebook posts about local youth sports and appreciating my support for community activities. My online presence had made me more visible and connected in town, not less. The vindication was sweet, but it was also irrelevant. I had learned that seeking external validation for my life choices was a trap that led to constant self-doubt and people-pleasing. Whether others approved of my social media activity, my parenting decisions, or my approach to property management was less important than whether I could look at myself in the mirror with respect and satisfaction. By the time summer arrived, marking 1 year since the initial conflict with Rachel began, I had created a life that felt entirely my own. My social media presence had evolved into something that brought me genuine connection and community engagement. My relationship with my grandchildren was stronger because it was based on mutual affection rather than guilt or obligation. My property was well maintained and producing reliable income from tenants who treated me and my investment with respect. Most importantly, I had learned to trust my own judgment about what was appropriate, reasonable, and worthy of my time and energy. I no longer filtered my decisions through other people's comfort levels or expectations. I had stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. The final test of my transformation came in late July, when Rachel called to ask if I would consider co-signing a loan for a larger apartment. Their current place was small, and they wanted to move somewhere with more space for the children and better schools. "I know it's a lot to ask after everything that happened," Rachel said, "but our credit is still recovering from the financial problems we had last year. Having a co-signer with your stability and property ownership would make all the difference." A year earlier, I would have said yes immediately, grateful for the opportunity to repair our relationship and help my daughter achieve her goals. I would have prioritized her needs over my own financial security and convinced myself that co-signing was a gesture of love and forgiveness. Instead, I took time to consider the request carefully. I consulted with Patricia about the legal implications of co-signing and reviewed Rachel and David's financial history over the past year. While they had made progress in stabilizing their income and expenses, they were still rebuilding their credit and had only recently begun demonstrating consistent responsibility with smaller financial obligations. "Rachel," I said when I called her back, "I'm proud of the progress you and David have made this year, and I'm glad you're in a position to consider upgrading your living situation. But I'm not comfortable co-signing loans for family members anymore. It creates a dynamic that can damage relationships when things go wrong." I suggested that she work with a credit counselor to improve her credit score over the next year, then apply for loans based on their own financial standing. I offered to provide a reference as a former landlord, which would document their recent history of responsible tenancy, but I wouldn't put my own financial assets at risk. Rachel was disappointed but not angry. She thanked me for considering the request and said she understood my position. The conversation ended amicably, with both of us respecting the other's perspective without feeling the need to change it. As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the sunset paint Penobscot Bay in shades of gold and crimson, I reflected on how much my life had changed since I first discovered Facebook and began sharing photos of my garden and stories of old Rockland. What started as a simple desire to stay connected with my community had become a journey towards self-respect and authentic living. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the harbor at sunset, the sky reflected in the calm water, and the lobster boats silhouetted against the horizon. I posted it with a caption that felt like a summary of everything I had learned. Every ending is also a beginning. Every sunset promises another sunrise. Every day we get to choose who we want to be and how we want to live. Grateful for all of it. The post received dozens of likes and comments from friends near and far. People who had followed my journey through the past year and appreciated both my struggles and my growth. But the response that mattered most came from Emma, who wrote simply, "Love you, Grandma. Thanks for showing me what strength looks like." I smiled and closed the phone, content to sit in the gathering darkness and listen to the familiar sounds of my hometown. Tomorrow I would post again, share again, live again, on my own terms and without apology. Tonight I was simply present in my own life, which was exactly where I belonged. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.